I wanted to recognize some of the other counselors who are here who are not up here on the panel. So Maria Greenberg, Ward Counselor from Ward 1 is here somewhere. Maria, where are you? There she is. Lenny Gentile at large from Ward 4. There's Lenny. Susan Albright, City Council President and at large from Ward 2. There she is. John Oliver, at large from Ward 1, right in the front. And Allison Leary, also Ward 1 at large and also in the front. Thank you. We are going to, let's see. Well, a couple of our panelists are missing, so I'll speak slowly for the ones who are here. My name is Emily Norton. I'm the Ward Counselor from Ward 2 for 2 more months. And next to me is Tariq Lucas, Ward 2 at large, who's going to miss me dreadfully. I feel sorry for him. I know you didn't know I have a stand-up second career, so you're all going to have to sit through it here. Next to Tariq, Rick Lipoff at large from Ward 8, also chair of the Land Use Committee. Pam Wright at large from Ward 3, also, serves on Zoning and Planning. Deb Crossley at large from Ward 5, chair of Zoning and Planning. And surprise tech support, Jennifer Bentley. Are you the president of the area council?
Yeah.
President of the Newtonville Area Council. Condolences. No, thank you for that. So we are not all going to have statements to start. So you don't all have to file out right now. The goal tonight is we have 18 slides. And the goal tonight is that when you leave, that you will have hopefully a better understanding of what is being planned for the regarding rezoning of Ward 2, Newtonville. People are going to have disparate opinions about the approach so far, and people up here have different opinions. My hope is that we can get through the slides first and then open it up to questions and comments, and that this presentation has been viewed by everyone here. It is very unbiased, fact-based. This really isn't a sales pitch one way or the other. People have their opinions, but this really is just to give you unbiased information on what is being planned, particularly for this ward. You could ask questions about the city, but this really is focused on Ward 2, why we're doing it, and and we're here to represent you. So it's really about you knowing what your elected officials are doing on your behalf. Some of it you like, some of it you don't, that's fine, but it's really so that you are aware of what we're up to, because this stuff is complicated. Is that everyone good? Okay. Anything else, folks? Okay. And the folks online, we set up a Zoom option about 20 minutes ago. So are you hearing anyone saying that they can't hear us?
They can hear, and they are going to tap their questions in the chat, and I'll read them out.
Okay. All right. So with that, yes. I'm confused because I'm usually showing slides when I'm in Zoom, but Jennifer's showing. Okay. So village rezoning, what is proposed for Newtonville? We'll start off really basic. What is zoning? You probably know this set of rules that control what may be built in each part of a community. So residential here, gas stations here, et cetera, et cetera. It lays out the rule for what can go where. I won't go into the whole history, but the point is that this change now is part of what Newton does, what communities do. They update their zoning over time. The first zoning ordinance was started in 1922. We've had several changes over the years, even somewhat recently. Folks are probably aware we updated our accessory apartments, the marijuana, et cetera. A lot of that was zoning, our inclusionary zoning, which we are going to touch on a little bit later as well, which is related to affordable housing. So in terms of what we're doing now, the village rezoning began in earnest in 2020. And this is the City Council Zoning and Planning Committee led by Deb, and our planning department began what's called Village Center Overlay District rezoning. An overlay district simply means the developer has the option of going with the existing zoning, which you can ask questions about, I won't get into, or the Village Center Overlay District. Okay, so that's what an overlay district means. In terms of the goals of the Village Center rezoning, as you can see, this is a chart from the Planning Department document. And again, you might not agree with these goals or not think of it. I'm just laying out the facts. In terms of the reasoning is that we would have more diverse housing options, supporting local businesses, having more active gathering spaces for our community, safer sidewalks and streets, and sustainable, accessible buildings. The host would like me to.
No, I don't.
Okay, sorry. The Zoom doesn't take much to confuse. Okay. Then after that, in 2021, the state passed what's called shorthand the MBTA Communities Law. I'm sure folks are aware of this. It required by right housing around trains and subways. By right means that no special permit is required. You're probably aware that the city council votes on special permits when it's not a by right development. When it's by right, the developer needs to get building permits and follow other rules, but they don't need the city council to vote on it. For Newton, and this, I pulled this from the Boston Globe yesterday, for Newton, that requirement, and we can talk about the formula they come with, is approximately 8,330 units. As the Globe said, as a rapid transit community, Newton has a high level of obligation under the state mandate. It must rezone to permit 8,330 multifamily housing units with 90% required near transit stations. And the deadline is the end of this year. It's really, the law was really about housing supply. The thought behind it was that if we increase the supply, that will bring down the cost. Now, you may not agree with that assumption and so forth. That's not, I don't think it'd be useful to debate that tonight. That's really something to take up with our state representatives and our state senator because they voted for that law. But that was the thinking behind it. So these rules do not have an affordability requirement per se in them. Now we have affordability requirements that we're going to talk about. So anyway, just, and then this map shows the communities that also are under various obligations, more if you have both subway and commuter rail as we do, less if you don't. This is from the law, and I don't understand as well as others on the panel do, so we can get into this, but this basically explains how they got to the 8,330. There is a formula. We can get into that. I really wanted to get more to what is required for Newton, and then if folks want to talk about this, they can. But 50% of the land has to be in a contiguous district. I mean, there's a bunch of qualifications around it that particularly the folks on land use, the folks on zoning and planning and the planning department have been all over. This is the citywide map, which I know it's hard to see, but you know, where there's blobs of color, you can see that's where more by right zoning is being proposed in order to comply with this law and to comply and to address our village rezoning. It's gone through several iterations, as those of you who are local government fans have been going to a lot of meetings. You know, we're now on 3.0, and this is an important detail. We have now combined MBTA Communities Law compliance with our village center into one docket item that we will be voting on. So that we weren't required to do that, but that is, you know, that is where things stand at this time. So this is the map of Newtonville. For folks who want to get a closer look, you should feel free at any time to come out. We have a larger one here on each side. You can look up where you like to shop, where you live, et cetera, et cetera. But this is the map, the close-up for Newtonville. And I'm gonna go through some of the, well, actually before I do that. So the red is the VC3, and I'm gonna talk about each of these. The blue is the VC2, and the green is the MRT, which we're gonna get to. And oh, and the black is where we are requiring multi-unit mixed use. Thank you. It's why Tricky sitting next to me on the first floor, right? That's the first floor. Yes. Yes, thank you. Okay. Never shy to display my ignorance. So VC3, what does that mean? The building height with a pitched roof is 4.5 stories. What does that mean? The building can be 5 stories tall, but because it's a pitched roof, we're calling that 4.5 stories and 71 feet. Now there is a way that you can have taller than that, which we're going to get to, but I just want to define these right now. If you are building within 50 feet of the lot line of an abutting residential area, then you can do 3.5 stories. Again, it's a pitched roof, it's really 4 stories, and 58 feet. If it's a flat roofed building, then you can do 4.5 stories, but it's really 5 stories, except it's set back and a height of 69 feet. And again, somewhat shorter if it's abutting a residential district, 3.5 stories, 4 setback, 56 feet. At this time, no parking requirements for commercial or residential units in BC3. Okay. Now we're going to move on to the blue area on the map, BC2, slightly shorter. And it's, very small writing, but I put it in there in case, because I'll send the slides out later, how these were defined. Some were the, sort of denser village centers and so forth, but so you can look at that later, but just for the purpose of staying high level. So in a BC2, the building height is, again, 3.5 stories, really 4 because of that pitched roof. If it's a flat roof, it's 3.5 stories, really 4, but the top story is set back. And again, no parking requirements for commercial or residential units. All right, so we did BC3, we did BC2. Gonna break there with the definitions and just show you the rendering from the planning department of what the village center of Newtonville looks like right now, mostly single story. And this is their rendering of what it could look like. The one on the left is pitched roof. The one on the right is flat roof with the setback. So just to give you a visual of that. Now, this is an image that was created by Councilor Wright so that people could see BC3 with BC2, sort of what it would look like if it was built to the maximum volume. We don't know that that would happen, but this is what it could look like, just to give you a sense of the scale. And I'm sure you recognize the Masonic Lodge building there.
No. Oh,
there is an option to have an even taller building if the developer is providing some affordable housing. So folks may be aware that we have an inclusionary zoning ordinance. Units of 7 and above have a requirement. Thank you, they're nodding. And I actually brought copies of that ordinance if anyone wanted, because it gets kind of complicated with charts and everything. I don't want to do it in here, but if folks want to look at that and ask questions afterwards, they can do that. So additional affordable housing, thank you, on top of what we already require. So you can add another story basically, and so be up to, for BC3, up to 84 feet, 5.5, which is really 6 stories for all the reasons I gave, if you are complying with these affordable additions as laid out below.
And you can add footprint too.
And you can add footprint. Okay, we're gonna nerd out a little bit later. I'm gonna get through this. Okay. The mixed use. So this was a big win. The original state law did not allow us to get credit for compliance to the MBTA communities law if we wanted to have mixed use in a building. So that was great that the state heard from us and many other communities that they wanted to do that. So any lot with a mixed use priority street frontage must provide ground story active use for the entire width of the front elevation of the building facing the priority street. How does that define? How are active uses defined? Retail, restaurants, specialty food, place of amusement. I don't know what that means. Not an amusement park, I assume. Personal service. Okay, yeah. So the folks on the committee will deal with it. Banks are permitted only on the 2nd floor. So that's something in terms of having more vibrancy in the village center. These historic photos are from Historic Newton, by the way. You probably figured that out, but I thought they were fun. So the last zone I want to talk about is the multi-residence transit MRT. And again, you can see the green on the map, and you come up and see it closer if you like. The pitched roof here is 2.5 stories or 40 feet. In terms of the height, a flat roof can be 2 stories or 24 feet. The dwelling units, more than 1 or 2 in many of these areas, which is what's allowed now, it can be up to 4 with a new build 1,500 square foot footprint max. There is an adaptive reuse provision. The idea here is to incentivize reuse. So to disincentivize tear down. So when you're preserving an existing building, one can imagine maybe a huge Victorian or something, you can build up to 6 units by right, adding to the building footprint and so forth as laid out here. The affordability piece would not apply here. So there would be no required affordable units in these developments up to 6 units. And at this time, we don't have a parking minimum in these zones. So just sharing that. Okay. This is the last, second to last slide. Oh, the last one says questions. So it's really the last slide. This is part of a process of rezoning. Right now, we are doing the village centers and the MBTA. Next would be rezoning the corridors, Washington Street, Needham Street, and Route 9. I actually had changed this and because it didn't make it to this version, but the next version after that, and Deb can speak more about that, is doing some cleanup of some definitions. So she can talk more about that. That's really, did I miss anything? Deb's like, oh my God.
Yes.
Don't even like, not let me say more.
Don't start there. Just the one
You gotta hold it up. Hold it up close to your mouth.
okay.
Yes.
The one definition I didn't hear you describe, and many people here know this, but you'd be surprised how many folks aren't aware of what multifamily means. It starts at 3 units. It doesn't mean 1 and 2 family. It means only 3 units and above. But it is, a multifamily home is as small as 3 units. Up to whatever.
Awesome. All right. Does anyone have anything else that's just dying to say? Oh. All right. With that, I'd love to open it up to questions. Oh, yeah. As the slide says, I'd love to open it up to questions, to comments. Please feel free to ask a question here. You might have to turn the mic on. And then Jennifer is monitoring the chat to see if anyone's got any questions or comments there.
No questions? All right, let's go home.
Andrew, you want to come up? Because I think it's good if you come up so that the people on Zoom can hear and everyone else can hear. You just got to turn it on. Thank you.
And lift it up, maybe.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So I have a question about the parking. I'm sure there's logic. So I'd like to hear the logic about not having parking requirements.
Anyone want to address that?
Happy to. We're gonna go first. I'll go first. Okay.
So the state has a very complicated formula and we need to zone for, not build, but zone for 8,330 units. And when we required parking, our numbers came way down. So that means we either need to do more denser or extend what we're upzoning now. If we don't require parking, then our numbers work better. The logic is supposedly, builders and developers will build some parking. We don't know what is some. Now, actually, Deb and I do agree that we should have some parking in the residential area, and that have voted down on ZAP, but that's another thing that will come up on Monday. We have our ZAP meeting and looking at amendments, and then it goes to the full city council, and then it can have amendments there, and then it'll get voted out by the end of the year.
Okay, all that is true. I probably wouldn't have started with the MBTA formula because I don't think that's the initial driver. For those of us who have been steeped in the weeds, dreaming about this for 3 years, and doing some homework outside of our work on the zoning and planning committee, and I'm looking at Allison Leary in the front seat because she's really more of an expert on this than I am, and so are other members of the council. But we do see that developers build parking whether or not we require it. We see that across the country. And we also know from looking at recent past projects to, very well, Austin Street and Trio, that the residential parking is not being used sufficiently. You build underground parking at about $150,000 a space is what it costs, adds a lot of cost to the housing, brings the price of housing up. And then we have 40 to 50% of those underground garages unused by the residents. So that didn't seem very smart to us. And I don't know if you remember, but in Austin Street, we required 1.5 spaces per unit. And in Trio, we went down to 1.25 spaces per unit, still 40% unused. So that's really interesting. We learned further, we have people working from home. A lot of people in Newton work from home. 40% was a number I heard recently. And then some people using the commuter rail, and folks who are retired. So a lot of folks have only one car, and some no cars. And it's just a lifestyle choice. There's more, but I'm going to pass the mic.
I just want to add one more thing. Especially in the big rentals, the parking, the number of units parking, it fluctuates per month. So at Trio, it ranged from 75% to 100%, 1-to-1. So it just depends on the month. It does go up and down.
Yes, Trio is a little less right now than one space per unit. They've come into the land use committee. For the, excuse me?
Using a little less.
Using,
Yeah.
yes, using less. And so they have all these extra spaces and they would like to rent them out to people who need overnight parking. To the businesses there, they can offer them to the people that work in them. And so that was our first real test case on how much parking was truly needed.
I also want to add something, to follow up on what, I'll be quick, if I'm not interrupted. To follow up on what Deb said, a lot of Newton residents do work from home. I think we are 10th in the country, the state, the country, in terms of folks working from home. Just want to throw that out there.
All right, let's go maybe in person and online, do it that way.
Okay. We have a question. Can you discuss the option for putting rezoning on hold until the impact is better understood, including negotiating the state, doing nothing but paying a fine, suing the state in conjunction with other towns as opposed to massively dense housing?
All right, I think the question was, do we really have to move ahead with compliance? I heard kind of both. I don't know if they meant the village rezoning and MBTA. I will respond regarding the compliance. I know that we have seen in the Boston Globe and so forth, Commonwealth Magazine, communities pushing back on complying with the law and questioning whether to do that. I personally will just say for myself, I don't support doing that. I feel like the state passed a law. I don't really want to be on the other side of that. And I have not heard any appetite for that from any Newton councilors. So I don't know that from what I've heard is support for moving ahead with compliance. We definitely have disparate opinions on moving ahead with compliance with MBTA while also doing the village center rezoning. That isn't something we have to do. That is something that many councilors do want to do, but not all. So that is something that you have some difference of opinion on.
Thank you. I just want to clarify how this was worded earlier, say it a little differently, in that we started with the village center overlay district zoning for the sake of addressing issues in Newton. It was later that the MBTA communities law came along and said we needed to zone for so many units and we needed to use their compliance formula and so forth. So it's been on our mind since then, we got the final regulations a little over a year ago. Can you hear me? A little over a year ago. And then they've been refined a couple of times. So we've kept our eye the whole time on what is the compliance formula requiring. The first thing we vote on, and the only thing the council votes on, is the village center overlay district. When we know that the current village center overlay district will meet the MBTA compliance requirements right now, today, the draft we have today. We know that it's 5 villages that have all of the requirements in them, central transportation and so forth. And we've made that 50% contiguous district that Emily mentioned, so that we can comply. But we need to decide how much of the village center overlay district we want to move forward. That is a decision we can make, but we must have those 5 villages in the mix if we want to comply with the MBTA formula. And it's once we adopt the village center overlay district at whatever scale that the planning department goes to work and puts together the application for compliance. Council doesn't do that.
There is difference of opinions. I'm one that would like to just do the MBTA Communities Act compliance and do the rest at a later time. I do have some issues with what we're zoning for. For instance, in Newtonville, a couple of years ago, we passed before I was in the city council, the Washington Street Vision Plan, which included Newtonville. And in the core of, like, on Walnut Street was 4 stories max. And what we're discussing now is higher than that. And, you know, I'd like to have some other tweaks to honor the Washington Street Vision Plan, which most residents wanted versus what we're getting. And that's something we're going to be in discussion in city council when it goes to the full committee.
Question from someone in the room? Al?
This question is directed to Councilor Lipoff. What specifically are you doing with the disparity in real estate prices, keep the north side of the city from becoming a dumping ground for high density housing? And specifically, what are you doing to help shoulder the high density housing in your neighborhood?
It's a good question. I can't respond to to saying the north side is a dumping ground. I can't respond to that. That's not true. The north side is very vibrant. It has several different neighborhoods. There's a lot of development going on, and a lot of it is going on the south side of the city. Probably 70% of all the tear downs are happening in Ward 8. One of the things about Ward 8 is we don't have a center. We don't have a village. It's the village of Oak Hill. We have no retail. We have no center. So for us to be included in this, we can't. Now, where do we go in Ward 8? We go to Newton Center, we go to Newton Highlands, we go to Chestnut Hill. I think that's the 3 areas that we go. And that corridor is going to be taking some new density. But I can't tell you that my neighborhood is taking density because we don't have a village center.
Let's take a question from the Zoom.
Here we go. Thank you. Here's a question. Why don't we overlay Chestnut Hill and Boston College areas? Maybe they won't count as much as the historic districts with the historic districts and educational zones, but fair is fair. All should take a role in this.
Well, I did think this was about Newtonville, but I'll take this. So when we were in Newtonville, that was the first time we had a map that showed overlapping the historic district at all. And while some folks thought that the MRT district was a good idea for an historic district because it would give owners of those properties more options for restoring their buildings, it was met with vehement opposition. And we thought, okay, we have 4 historic districts in the city of Newton. We should take them out of this round. There's just too much else to deal with. It's not generating a lot of housing units. Let's postpone discussion of that until we can see what happens. The other part of Chestnut Hill is that it's along Route 9. That's the part of Chestnut Hill that has been developed and has the development potential. It's a major corridor. And we are going to be studying our corridors as a singular effort once we get through some of this.
Yeah, just to follow, can you all hear me? Okay, good. Just to follow up on the question, they asked about Boston College, the B line over there on Tom Ave. I think that should have been upzoned. You have some small commercial shops there. You have other multifamily housing there, and you have the B line, although not the world's greatest transit line. You've all seen the articles where you can walk faster than the B line. But I think that was an opportunity, I believe, to have just a little extra density in Chesterfield.
I'm sorry, I've got to continue on my question. Just to let everybody know, Ward 8 has 80 units of new real estate on LaGrange Street in the past few years. Northland, that the Land Use Committee approved, is also in Ward 8 with over 800 units. So we also are having a 40B coming with another 400 units in Ward 8. And we're fighting one that is not well designed by Toll Brothers on Route 9, right down the street from my house. So my thinking was Village Center and what we could bring. We've already brought all that to essentially Ward 8. Thank you.
It occurred to me, I didn't talk about the next steps. We are going to be, the committee's going to vote, right? The committee on Monday?
We hope, and we should, because we've gotten to the end of a lot of our work.
So
move it to
tune in-
council.
You can tune in on Monday.
Yeah.
I think we're on in person now. Yeah, come to the microphone, please. Yeah, actually, if people line up behind the microphone, then I don't feel bad who I'm choosing.
Two quick questions, I think. One, just to revert back to the parking piece, I'm wondering how that changes in November to April, when you can't park on the street anymore overnight. So that's just, we'll put that on hold. I don't know how that impacts Trio or what they want to do with renting. I know I get approached frequently with people who want to rent space in my driveway during those months. Secondly, just curious what each or any of you consider affordable in terms of affordable housing. I keep hearing that term thrown out there. I work at the library. The vast majority of my colleagues cannot afford to live in Newton. Some of them commute 45 minutes to an hour. Particularly the younger people, but even people who've been there for quite some time. So I'm just, in terms of city workers that are working full-time that cannot afford a place, is that affordable, whether it's renting or buying?
So, great question. We're a very desirable community. If you own your home, you don't want to sell it for less than the value, so you're going to make the most of it. So folks who've been here for a long time are doing very well. And if you have a place that you're renting out, for the most part, people want to make the most from their rental as well. So there's no magical formula. As folks probably remember, there was some of us were involved with a moratorium on tear downs, and people came out of the woodwork because they didn't like that we were putting limits on their what they could do with their property. So it's a touchy situation. Anytime you put limits on how much someone can make, then there's winners and losers. So that's why we have these, somewhat complicated programs where there's a lottery, people have to apply. As you probably know, there's a state law called 40B that communities have to have at least 10% of their housing designated as affordable under a certain definition. It's not just cheap rent. And until you have reached that, developers can bypass your zoning laws, and that's why we have 40B developments and so forth. And to get into those affordable units, there's a percentage of the project. You have to meet income requirements, wealth requirements. I'm not an expert on that. Maybe folks here can speak more to that. So that's what we have. I live on the north side, north of the Pike. There is still relatively affordable rents over there. I'm sure that will change over time, but that is kind of a complication as well, is that when you tear something down and then rebuild it, well, you want to make your money back, something that's been there. So it's very complicated. I don't know if there's a simple answer. I think that I know that we are all committed to doing, all of us on the city council. I've never heard anyone say they don't care about making Newton welcoming and affordable. It's just complicated how you get there.
Free market is at play here, very close to the city of Boston, and the rents are high. These units that will ultimately be built are a missing piece of what Newton is. We have very big, expensive homes, And then we have affordable housing that we create from larger developments. But this middle market, this mid-market, smaller units for retirees, for our kids who are getting out, getting their first jobs, for teachers, for firemen, for anybody. That's one of the goals here. And anything that's built in any of these buildings over 6 units, the 7th unit on, anything over 6 units.
Over 6.
Yes, will, a percentage will be truly affordable based on the area median income at different levels, 50, 60, 80% of that median income, which right now is about 88.
Depends on the size of the family.
Yeah,
I'm not hearing anybody respond to the question, though. I'm just curious what each or any of you consider affordable. What you would
There's
consider in
two
this day and
things.
age affordable, whether it's for rent or to purchase, what
That's
do you consider affordable?
it's a person.
Not the laws.
It depends.
I'm gonna try this because I think I don't mean to be flip, but I think it doesn't matter what I think is affordable. What's affordable to me? I'm not a wealthy woman. I couldn't afford to buy a house here today. I've been here 38 years, probably 8 years after I moved here. I couldn't have afforded to buy my own house because home values have gone up so dramatically in our city. And I have personal story too. 2 children, 30 somethings. One had to leave the state, who had a condo in South Boston, couldn't afford to go from a 1-bedroom they owned to a 2-bedroom, so had to move. And this is a common problem. You've probably read the statistics. 111,000 people, young people, professional people with families have left our state in the recent few years to move to adjacent states because it's cheaper for them to buy housing. All of that. But what is affordable? So the definition actually does make sense, does matter. When we require units to be affordable at a certain area median income, it means that you can't be paying more than 30% of your income on housing related costs. And that's actually high from where my thrifty self started, but that, at least you're not paying 40 and 50%. There's a lot of people here who are house poor, is that how you say it? Or challenged because they're paying huge percentages of their income on their rent or their house or their mortgage, if they can get it. So that's not okay. I think that's what we're saying is it's not okay. And the bunch of rules and the potential subsidies we have to put together, and we created an affordable housing trust I did answer the question. It's what I think is one thing. How we care and put it together is another.
Well, I mean, just the whole you can hear me, the affordable housing, there we go. Yes, as Rick said, when you have 7 more units, you'll get an affordable unit. What is affordable to me is different than what is affordable to you, is affordable to Emily and Rick and all of us here. We have 100 people here, you'll get 100 different definitions for affordable housing. So it's the way how you phrase the question, it's a little difficult to answer, but certainly we can talk offline with us.
All right, let's go to a question online.
This plan has several intended outcomes: vibrant city centers, affordable housing, new businesses, etc. And we want to avoid unintended consequences, more traffic, added pressure on city services and schools. How will the city keep track of these metrics and know if things are going according to plan? And who owns the responsibility of keeping track of metrics? And what mechanisms for tweaking policies will we have when when they go haywire? This plan is completely silent on all those things, and I'm not aware of any other plan that addresses them.
Okay, so question about how are we tracking the impacts of this increase? Well, could be density, as someone did mention. This isn't a requirement that all these units get built. It's just allowing it by right. I'm not aware that we don't necessarily have a goal beyond compliance. That's why for some of us, I do think compliance with the law and then seeing how it goes and make tweaks from there is a savvy thing to do. But maybe there's another answer here.
So we've talked about this a lot in the Zoning and Planning Committee, and I think it's a really important question and it's a really important effort that once we adopt a set of zoning rules, every single one of these projects, any project that might manifest as a result of these rules has to go through the planning department first. So we will know as soon as something is filed, what is coming in. We'll understand what's working and what isn't. The process we have in council for amending things is very simple. If we don't see the kind of development we're looking for, or we see too little or too much, we can amend the rules. You might have noticed that there were a lot of people during the public process, some of whom are in the room, who asked us to do more. And, you know, to expand beyond the boundaries of what you are looking at today, particularly with that residential zone. And as you heard earlier with the historic districts and so forth, we're trying to keep it actually pretty tight. But I'm going to say, my position is if we do not dip our toe into the water here with this plan, we're not going to understand what it is going to produce.
I'm on ZAP, and from my point of view, I haven't seen, I don't know who's gonna be collecting the data, who's gonna be reviewing the data, what data we're collecting. I have not seen any of that.
One of the reasons why planning says we're not going to do certain things is because nobody has a crystal ball. The units, whether you say 8,300, 15,000, that is a number that if we burn down every property in these zones to the ground and then build everything all at once, that's the number. And that is an equation that isn't going to happen overnight. And one of the reasons why when we say we need to plan for our schools and everything with this, it is not something all of a sudden within a year, 2 years, 10 years, it's all of a sudden got to come out of the ground. An owner of a property needs to want to sell their property. Somebody needs to want to buy it and not keep it what it is, but redevelop it in a different way. Right now, as we all sit here, there are 4,000 potential new units in the city right now. Every single family that is in a multifamily zone can be turned into a two-family. That's 4,000 additional units. Why aren't we worried about that? Because every year, a handful come down and are turned into 2-unit. The potential is for 4,000, but we don't have to plan for our schools for 4,000 more units coming out of the ground. There has been a little bit of a fear factor here on those numbers, and everybody needs to understand that that is a formula we need to meet. And can tell you, it's not a number that's going to come out of the ground in a decade, 2 decades. This is going to be a long time coming to see a lot of this development.
Yeah, to follow up, I think what Emily said, and I think what the question was getting at, should we just abide by the 8,330, which is the state law? I think for those particular village centers, it's around, I think maybe 93 or 9,600 units. Abide by that, and then essentially punt on the remaining 6,000 to 7,000 units in the non-MBTA districts. That would give us, I think that's the right way to go. Abide by state law and then punt on the remainders, but we'll see what happens.
Let's go to in person.
Can you hear me? Great. Good evening. Sorry.
Get closer.
Good evening. Thank you to Councillor Norton for organizing this meeting, and thank you to the panelists for your public service. My name is Thomas Grazer, and my family lives in Ward 2. I'm a student, and I've been studying economics with great interest for some time, which is why I have some questions about the paradigm that appears to be guiding the fuller administration and those on the City Council who support the Village Center Overlay District, VCOD, zoning proposal. These proponents of the VCOD say that zoning to incentivize construction by for-profit developers of 1,000 more high-density housing units by right at the highest price the market will bear will result in lower rents and housing prices overall. That is simply not true. Not in theory, nor according to actual data and peer-reviewed research. The economics 101 argument that when supply exceeds demand, there will be more downward pressure on the prices depends on certain things. The theory of supply and demand equilibrium assumes the things being sold are identical and that sellers and buyers have perfect information. Neither is true in this case of housing markets. Demand can be infinite for a home in Newton, but supply can never be. And prices won't drop because developers would stop building at the first sign they wouldn't make their maximum profit. I think there are examples of postponed development projects in West Newton already. Moreover, the data and extensive peer-reviewed research shows that upzoning for higher density pushes housing prices up and existing residents out, as they are displaced by eviction, demolitions, and an inability to keep up with the rising cost of living and associated decline in quality of life associated with the rapidly densifying and gentrifying environment. Perhaps the best known academic paper on the subject is the 2020 treatise of Storfer and Rodriguez-Hose at the London School of Economics, who found that far from improving affordability, upzoning increases gentrification. The authors concluded that policies such as upzoning unleash market forces that serve high-income earners, therefore reinforcing the effects of income inequality rather than tempering them. MIT's Yoda Freemark's 2019 paper on upzoning in Chicago over a 5-year period found that upzoning resulted in higher property prices with no increase in the construction of affordable housing, concluding that those hopes to address affordability may need to look elsewhere for a solution. So I have 2 questions. First, if the theory and the research show that upzoning for high density, thousands more units, will actually make housing less affordable and income inequality worse, why would our elected representatives choose to do it? Who benefits from it? Second, if they wish to right the wrongs of the past and add and advance social justice, why would our elected representatives promote zoning changes that would incentivize rentals and put home ownership and family financial stability through home ownership further out of reach for marginalized people, and most people in the future? They're proposing changes that will make home ownership in places like Newton, something that 70% of Newton adults enjoy, out of reach for people of my generation. How is it right to limit our future choices, opportunities, and aspirations? Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. So if you live in Ward 2, I'm glad I'm already not going to be here because I'd be worried about an opponent. So I will ask others to. He's young and adorable, but if the rest of you could keep your comments and questions a little bit shorter, that would be awesome. So I will just comment. Yeah, no. We're gonna answer right now. Yeah, I'm on it. So I am sympathetic to many of your points, but I would like to remind us all that the state law is what is requiring the MBTA communities law. So we can agree or disagree. I am sympathetic that we could build a lot of housing in Newton, and if we're so desirable. On the other hand, it is a regional. We've got 177 communities that are also building more or zoning for more by right housing. So that's the argument. We'd be here all night if we debate that. So I get that, but that is something that is the state law. In terms of, now what was the other question? There was the question about
Why would we deny our children a future?
Yeah.
We wouldn't.
Like I said before, it's very complicated, and that's why we have all these programs so that wealthier communities will have more affordable units. The Armory is a wonderful, I think a lot of us consider, we voted for unanimously, project in West Newton was 100% affordable. So having the opportunity to do more things like that would be great. There's limited opportunity to do that. So that's, we have these other programs. We've got 40B. It's not ideal in many ways, but it has advanced. We have more affordable units in the city as a result of that. So I know it's probably not satisfying you, but I really appreciate the comment on the question.
Young man, I have 2 30-something children. They are both suffering as a result. They're good jobs, they have bright futures, but not here. Both suffering from a lack of housing supply in Newton and in our state. It is not an uncommon condition. If I thought, or if we thought we were going to be taking a future from you, we would not be doing this. We are absolutely doing this because we hope, even if it's not in time for your generation, it will be in time for the next generation. It is going to take a long time for our state, because this is a regional problem. It's not only a Newton problem. Newton happens to be one of the most expensive communities in our state. But it's going to take a long time to satisfy the need because we have been underbuilding since the late 1980s. 1990 was a turning point in our state where zoning laws became all of a sudden extremely strict on the eastern portion of our state and all over, but particularly here. And you can see the statistics. The supply went down relative to the need and the prices went up. We are now the fourth highest priced housing state in the nation. And we're, like I said earlier, we are seeing an exodus of young people. And when it comes your time to figure out, okay, where do I want to take my first job? And, you know, what are my cost of living expenses going to be? The young people I know through my kids, a little older than you, but, you know, they're doing the math and they're leaving.
All right, let's give it to Jennifer for the next question online.
Other than not putting the overlay on a historic district in Newtonville, what can be done to protect the historic buildings in our neighborhood? It seems the Historic Commission has no ability to preserve any of the structures. A Victorian house was just torn down on Harvest Street last month. What steps are we taking to prevent developers from destroying these houses?
So one of the things in the MRT district, which is in the residential neighborhood, is adaptive reuse. And the whole idea is to keep that old Victorian, to keep the streetscape and add behind the house. And it makes it more desirable than the tear down for a multifamily. So right now they tear down the house. They're only allowed a 1,500 square foot footprint. If they keep the house, they can add 50% more and they can have 6 units. So I think that's a good incentive. It's not perfect. I see some other issues with it. I would like to see a little bit more open space requirement and more lot frontage, because right now, especially corner lots, they can be subdivided. And so there might be more tear downs from that. But the MRT is a good start on keeping the historic houses. And it's true, the way to really keep something is to actually landmark it. And in Newtonville, I think there's just one building landmark, 2? Okay, what's the second one?
The Masonic building.
Yeah, yeah.
The Sheboygan Church.
Church. Oh, the church. Okay, yes. So there's only 2 landmark buildings in Newtonville, but that's more than Newton Center and more than a lot of the other villages too.
That's cool. All right, let's go to the next person in person. Yes.
How come the line didn't
Uh-oh,
advance?
you lining up a speech? Not as adorable, no offense.
For doing this.
Come closer to the mic, please.
I'd like to nominate this gentleman for city council.
The invited candidate.
So I just want to introduce myself. I'm Alan Lobovitz. I've lived in Newton for 40 years. I'm here this evening to express my opposition to the current Village Center Overlay District Plan. My opposition is in part why I'm running for city council.
Right, no, we can't politic in this building.
I won't say
Mr.
anything
Lopez.
else about that.
Thank you.
Like many of the citizens of Newton, I have grave reservations about the current plan. Although I support additional new housing and a more streamlined process, I oppose the current plan. I agree with compliance, as other people have said and other councilors have stated. I agree with and compliance with the state requirement for 8,330 units, but no more until we study the impact of those thousands of units. As been pointed out, there is no plan to do that. And I think that's very problematic. We need to now have a plan to assess the impact of the additional housing units. Don't know how quickly this will happen. We've created an incentive for developers to develop. And I think if the opportunity is there, they will take advantage of it. So I don't think we really know how quickly, whether, you know, the idea that it's multi-generations away seems unlikely.
Okay, do you have a lot more?
Just a little bit.
Okay.
So I oppose the current plan for 4 reasons. First, we need more affordable housing, and there are ways to do that. I think the current plan and the current provisions in the city are not adequate to create the affordable housing that we need. It's been already pointed out that this trickle-down idea that somehow thousands of more units will bring prices down. I just want to again compliment our young scholar here for pointing out the data, the actual evidence that this will not achieve that. Second, there is an assumption that the thousands more units built in a concentrated area around public transit will not substantially increase the number of cars on the road. We just talked about Trio, and even if you use a 0.75 average for the units, if you just for the 8,000 units we're talking about an additional 6,000 cars.
Mr. Lovitz, I just want to be able to get, I want to get to the maximum comments. So if you could, can that be good? Can that be good?
That's the last comment.
All right.
The current plan will displace our highly valued small locally owned businesses during construction and thereafter due to unaffordable rent for commercial space. And finally, the current proposed guidelines for upright development need to be changed. We were just talking about that. Councilor Wright was mentioning that, to assure more preservation of trees and green space while ensure parking to avoid overwhelming our streets with parked cars.
Okay, thank you. It sounds like that was more of a comment rather than a question, so I don't think we need to respond to that. Yeah, I want to go back and forth with the online.
But we don't have a question from the audience. He didn't ask a question.
No, I know. That's why I'm. Oh, good point. All right. Yeah. Up as we go along here. Anyway, yes, please.
I know that you work in the environmental movement. And I have a 2 question. One is, if you believe that climate change is a crisis, and if you do, how that belief would square with wanting to limit our upzoning only to compliance with the law and not to building as many units as possible that allow people to live lives with a lower carbon footprint, driving less, taking public transit, biking, etc. Thank you.
Yes, great question. I do believe climate change is a crisis, and I think that Newton should feel proud of moving ahead with compliance. It's actually 25% growth in the buy right housing. So I think there's nothing to be embarrassed about with moving ahead. And I just, to keep you in mind, this law was written by housing advocates, and they did the math and thought this is what's fair for Newton. So I am sure that one could always do more. One could do more than the BCOD plus MBTA that we're talking about. It's all sort of where you draw the line. I wouldn't be embarrassed about Newton complying with the law. As I just mentioned, there are communities around Eastern Massachusetts who are actually looking to fight compliance. So I think that that's reasonable. I don't think that we should be embarrassed by only complying with what the state directed us to do as part of their regional supply increase plan. You know what I mean? So I feel good about that. I think it's very consistent with my values in terms of being worried about climate change and also being interested. I mean, speaking of that, the state didn't mention this, but over the coming years and decades, people are going to have to move away from the coast of Boston. They're going to have to move away from Cape Cod. I mean, I work with someone who's like, yeah, Worcester should be our new, stuff is going to start getting real, people. So we're going to need more housing. I could really walk out about it. I don't think we should be putting housing in flood zones. I'm not going to get into that here. Anyone wants to stay after, but I could probably talk about that for about 4 hours. But so I appreciate the question. I feel it's my views are very consistent with what I do for a living and what I value. that was for me, so we can move straight to the, if that's okay. to,
No, I'm-
online.
I'm just gonna amalgamate a couple of the questions because they're getting repetitive. Basically, people are asking, how can the area absorb all the new people, traffic, and the pressure on city services? How is that being, how is
Yeah, so
that?
the question is how, with the increase in by right zoning and potentially housing units, how would we deal with the services? I do
Yeah.
feel like we addressed that with the previous answer. You know, we've got sort of disparate opinions. So with all respect to that person, I'd like to go to the next person online or in person.
You can go in person.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. I'd like to ask, how many of these potential units are going to be for home ownership? I am really unbelievably tired of hearing about rental units. I think we do need to provide rental. It's a great option for people who need flexibility and also stability. But as a person who's, still working, but I'm older, I just sold my home. I'm very privileged that I got a lot of money in Newton. I did end up staying in my ward, but why aren't we building townhomes? That's what I was looking for, which I did luckily get. I wanted to keep owning. I didn't want to be an older person who had to rent and use up all my savings. I still wanted the benefit of being a homeowner and getting, the benefits of that. Plus, if we're going to want people who are teachers, firefighters, library workers, people from outside our city, people from Boston, people who are immigrants, people who are refugees, people who are different than us, we need to provide them home ownership options because that's how you live the American dream. That's how you are able to afford other things in your life, provide for your future generations. And I don't understand why we're not focusing on that. And can you tell me, also, are we thinking outside the box? We have an affordability housing fund. I don't know what it's called, I'm sorry. But why can't we use that to help people buy homes? And if we're going to downsize a lot of these parcels, count to smaller units, why can't they become condos or townhomes or home ownership buying programs? It's just unbelievable how people are not thinking about attracting different types of people to our city. We're all
I think we got it. I want to make sure we can move on. I know that everyone's going to want to answer that.
Luxury apartments, who's going to be living here?
Thank you. No, it's a great question. I think we're all going to want to comment because it's such a great question. I know that when we've had the trio, the Austin Street, the new project that's proposed for Craft Street, I'm not the only one who's been urging home ownership for those reasons. It seems like they do make more money off of the rental. This is what we're often heard. I don't know. I don't serve on ZAP if there is an incentive or disincentive for rental versus home ownership. So
the whole rental versus home ownership, we recognize serve on land use, so we see this a lot. What I believe what will happen is with the MRT zones and those 4 to 6 units that could be built by right, I presume those are more likely to be home ownership condos, just because the total number of housing units are low. We can't require it. That's why we can't do it. But with the VC2 and VC3, where you're going to see much larger mixed-use developments or multifamily housing, those are probably going to be rentals, just because we have not seen any large number of condos go on the market that's around 40, 50, or 60 or more. We just did the West Newton Bank, and that was 50 units, and those were rentals. But I'll let others speak to that.
It's a law. We cannot dictate the form of ownership. We can talk about height, number of units. There's a lot of things that we can have control over, but whether or not they choose to do condos or rentals, we are not allowed to put that upon the development.
And in the present climate right now, roughly, and it's not always 100%. If a project is under 25 units, it's most likely it's going to be condos. And if it's more than that, it's most likely to be rentals.
All probably true. I guess I also want to say there's nothing wrong with people who live in apartments. And there are many reasons why people choose to do that. I came to the Newtonville Fair, a couple Saturdays ago, whenever it seems it was recent. And I try always to talk to young people I don't know. And there were many people who had moved here a year, 2 years, 3 years ago. They were all renters. They were looking for homes. They were hoping to settle here. They either came here for the schools because they have kids now, or they're hoping to have families here. It's also, we're well located, of course, as we all know. And they don't have the down payment for, look, the median home price in our community right now is $1.8 million, just up from 1.6 last year. It's crazy. So this is why we're trying to make more available.
Jennifer, why don't you, take the next online thing?
Okay, here's a question. Isn't it reasonable to zone now for 25% more households as required by the MPTA Act, and then study the abilities of Newton to address the pressure on the infrastructure before going to build an additional 25%?
I think that we answered that. So let's go to
Okay.
that person.
The law.
Speaking to the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. I pressed something or?
No.
No,
speak.
speak.
I have 2 questions of the law itself, okay? The law says a reasonable district. It doesn't say 25% of your existing housing. That's what was passed, okay? And then it allowed the Department of Housing Development under the governor as a guideline. The guideline is 25%. It's not the law, right? And it was 25% regardless of your zone, of your density. So we're pretty dense, okay? 5,000 people per square mile. So we're pretty dense. So regardless of anything, they said 25%. This is the governor's office, okay? Not the law, okay? Was there any, they could have said 100%, right? There was no pushback on whatever number they said. So you keep saying the law says 25%. Was there any appetite or attempt by the city council to push back on the governor's office and say, we can't do 25%, and our legislature didn't pass 25%? I don't know why everyone keeps saying 25% is the law, but it's not.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think I addressed this early on, that I don't know how useful it is to get into the state law. There's the law, then there's guidance. We have had some successes. I commented on changing the guidance so that we could have mixed use. I personally would like to change the guidance, and I've personally been lobbying. Right now, they say a community may limit development out of flood zones, doesn't say shall. I think that's not very farsighted. But I feel like we've answered that. I don't want to get into that. All right.
Clarification though, for everybody's sake. I know. So the regulatory framework that's passed by the agency that the state deems is the agency who will administer the law becomes part of the law.
No, they said guideline.
Yeah, I know what they call it, but whatever they call, that's how it works. The law identifies them as the agency who will administer the law and determine compliance, and that they will write the rules.
They could have said 100%.
And, the AG's office came down very clearly, telling us what we had to do.
I had a second part of my question, if it's okay.
Okay.
The law says apartment of housing suitable for children, right? The census measures like household use of vehicles every single year in Newton. We don't need to guess what it is, okay? Or hypothesize. It's 2 vehicles with families with children, okay? It's 1.7 for every household, okay? So every family with children needs 2 vehicles, okay? To say we're having no parking requirements, and these are supposed to be suitable for children, is ridiculous, okay? We're gonna get single people and families. Now, I don't know why Austin and Trio are this sacred thing we have to quote all the time. The census measures it for the whole city every year. You should use the census data about households and household use of vehicles and how people get to work, which they also measure. We don't have to guess about how people work, the census measures that in Newton every year. You should use that data and not some pie in the sky hypothesis about markets and stuff. And I live in Cambridge and Somerville. You just have parking. Well, if they don't have enough parking, it's just cars every place. That's what's going to happen.
All right, so I'd like to interpret that as, like a response. We are not. So we're not requiring parking, but it is a very the law does want family friendly. So how do we, you know, especially those on zoning and planning, maybe, you know, respond to that? Fair question.
Our zoning says 2 parking spaces per unit. It does not tell you you have to have more parking spaces because you have children. That's number one. No.
In the new zoning.
Oh, in the new zoning? Oh, you're saying that's what you think we should do? Yes,
Zoning, we're saying no parking, so how do we square that?
Because families used to.
family friendly is what the law says we're supposed to do. On the other hand, we are not allowed also by the law to tell how many units we want in a building, to limit the number of units, or to say how many bedrooms. And-
Family friendly should pipe on.
Okay, that's your opinion. That's your opinion. I understand.
No, send it out that way.
You want to go this way?
Oh, okay.
They're gonna
Okay, we're gonna go to
go,
there.
go to the audience.
Okay.
To the mic.
I have a couple of corrections.
Really closer.
Northland is in 5-2, right?
Faces you, but it's in.
In the activity.
Go closer. We can't hear you.
Use for the MRT. If you have a lot that's over 30,000 square feet, or if you wish multiple buildings on the lot and you go through the adaptive reuse process, it is all through site plan review, which means it's a by right process. Okay, so those are 2 just clarifications that I wanted to put out there. But you know, my main question and the concern I have is what is informing, you know, the actual siting of the, you know, the specific lots in each of the village center overlay districts? Because I feel as if there wasn't enough feeder data into what was constructed. So I would like to know, where is the citywide studies that have been done, the impact studies, the infrastructure studies, the effects, the economic effects on small businesses, and then, you know, the parking and the transit. I just feel as if a lot of this data was not even presented, and the basis of the designation of the village center overlay districts.
So some of us counselors wanted that and did request it, but we did not get that.
Yeah, I feel like we answered that.
Keep going.
Let's go to the next line.
No, keep going that way.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Next.
We didn't get that data. You said you didn't get it, you asked for it. Is there an answer?
They're not doing it.
So let's stick to the process here. Go ahead, ma'am.
I'm Edie Garinger, and I've been Ward 2, Newtonville. So I just wanted to say a few things. I want to say something to you, Councilor Crossley, about you seem confused as to why the people in Newtonville are concerned with all the other talking about. And it's because there's so much density already in Newtonville. There's a lot of density proposed. And even though I know you can't use what is already been decided along Washington Street, and part of this, we in Newtonville who live here know that we've had Austin Street, we have Trio, we have Johnson Street coming, we have those projects in West Newton coming, we have other projects along Washington Street further down coming. So we're aware that a lot of density is happening. It does appear to be, to me, naive in the less affluent parts of the city, but that's just me. So that's all I'm saying. Now, I have 2 very specific questions. One is, I don't understand why Wobbin wasn't included in the village overlay system.
It is.
And because
Wobbin is included. Wobbin is
very,
included.
very little, and it's on the green line, which is sort of more transit friendly than the commuter rail, in my opinion. And the second one is that there's, I think there was a proposal that anything 30 units and under would be taken out of, we put in some, taken out of special permits and be put in a mayorally appointed board. And is that been voted on yet?
Yeah, explain what it is first.
Yeah. Fine, because I may have the details.
Okay, on the second part, so part of what's being proposed right now is if a lot is more than 30,000 square feet, then it goes to special permit. If it's between 20 and 30,000 square feet, and I think it's something like 67 lots or so, it would go in front of the,
Planning board.
planning board for a site, review. They cannot reject it. Yes, it's appointed board by the mayor. One concern I have is, the bigger lots, 30,000 square feet, over 30,000, it goes to special permit. I personally would like to see that come down, but also, developers can combine lots and subdivide lots by right. So if they have like the, I think Walgreens lot in Newton Center is at 35,000 square feet. So they could do, a 7,000 square feet lot and then a 28,000, and then it'll be all, can be by right. So there is some review for 20 to 30,000, and then over that is by special permit.
So has that been voted on? Is that?
Well, that's part of it, this whole thing now. Well, we can make amendments and stuff like that, yes. Keep going. You want?
We just had an event at Woburn. Very simply, if you look at the Woburn map, they have a very tiny commercial center. And they have a very small.
Folks, please, let's not turn into a mob. I get that you might not like something that Rick is saying. There have been times over the last 10 years, I haven't liked something that Rick said, but it's gonna go over, so believe me, we can say when people don't agree. We totally get it. I just really think it's better if you ask a question, Rick answers, you can love it or hate it.
Indulge me. What were you saying? It is, and it's part of our plan. They absolutely, it is just like Newtonville. It is part of this. But what I want to explain is it's a very small commercial area. So the development that will be there will not be as vast as other areas because of the nature of the center, but it is in the plan.
Rick is correct. Has very close boundaries, right? And there's two churches that bound it, and the old library that bounds it, and it's all in the district. We laid the district over all of those things. Is that better?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, we laid the district over all of those things. And there's an historically landmarked building that's protected. The whole site is protected. So there is very little opportunity for additional mixed use development. But there is more opportunity for that zone that Pam was describing earlier as having a lot of potential for adaptive reuse, that MRT zone. And we did extend that all the way up Beacon Street and some of around the side streets. I hope people are going to see the advantages of that. So as you say, you don't want to go too far too fast, but that's a zoning alternative that a lot of homeowners might really enjoy having the option of implementing. So, but every single commercial mixed use property, church, landmark building, existing housing complexes are overlaid with the VC2 or VC3 designation in Woburn, and then you hit homes.
Let's take the next one in person. We've got, let's see, it is 7:24. I like to end meetings on time. I see there's a lot of people. I am happy to stay if others are as well. So just wanted to lay that out. Go ahead, sir.
Sure. My name is Richard. I had a question. The photo, is that Bullo's Pond?
It is, isn't it beautiful?
It is beautiful. And that is actually where I had my first car accident.
Beautiful.
No, and skidded into a telephone pole. Everyone was fine, but lost the first car. Long time Newton resident. Grew up here, 41 years old. I'm a little older than most of the people in the audience, so I hope you'll give me a little respect. But I grew up here. I went to probably a lesser known Ivy League than my friend over here, but still, it was the worst of the Ivies. But I moved to Boston. I lived in Boston for 5 to 7 years. My wife and I have been very successful. She's from Maine. I said, let's look all around Boston, buy a house. 5 years later, we live in Newton. She says, as long as your parents don't stop by. My parents still live here. We
You know,
bought
they
a
can only
house.
see this Zoom.
Yeah. My parents bought a house in Newton for $112,000 in 1979, and my dad still complains he overpaid. I bought a house 7 years ago in Newton for $933,000. That is 1/3 the size of his. And my wife and I live there today, and we bought it from someone in this room today. We are so appreciative to be here. In the years that I lived in Boston, I made multiple friendship groups, and I counted specifically 17 great friends. When my parents moved in, across the street was a butcher and a school teacher. Today, it's 2 lawyers. My friends in Boston were teachers, Harvard-educated professors now. All 17 don't live in Boston. They don't live in Newton, and all of them live outside Route 95. I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but I am very rich in money, but I am very poor in my friends. Please find a way that my friends, for the best 2 years I lived in Newton, where they had a rental, which then they moved to Bloomington, Indiana, and they have a house for half of what they're paying for rental here. I don't have an opinion on what we should build, but I want it so that pretentious people like me aren't the only young people up here. You would enjoy my friend a lot more than you would enjoy me. Thank you.
You know, that would be self-deprecation. Thank you. I think there wasn't a question there. I appreciate the comment, though. Mr. Harrington, you're gonna close us out? No. Uh-oh.
I have 2 questions.
Got a big pack of papers there. 3 minutes.
I have 15 minutes worth of comments, but I'm gonna do so to sheet of paper and I'll pass them out after I've finished talking to anyone that's here.
Thank you.
Speaking to the mic, Peter.
I think that the way you have,
Speak into the mic, please.
I think that the way you have written your zoning ordinance, subject it to being challenged and disqualified under the MBTA Communities Act. The Communities Act, which I understand you're trying to address, says that the housing provided that multifamily housing provided without grade age restriction and suitable for families with children. You are including in your zoning ordinance the building of units that are not suitable for children, they being studio units and 1-bedroom units. And I suggest to you that that may well disqualify your entire ordinance as not being compliant with the MBTA Communities Act. So I request that you insert in your ordinance the following language, that you can just copy it from the statute, and you can say, such housing shall be without age restriction and shall be suitable for families with children. I think that solves a big problem. It doesn't solve the young man's problem who was just here.
Needs friends.
It does. I've got another, my next question will unsolve it. But I think that it's important to add that language. I'm not sure that the pro-development people will appreciate that because they want to build those studios in the 1-bedrooms. And I know that some of the people who spoke want to have smaller units. And I think that is a problem. But the MBTA Communities Act was designed to help families with children. And the young person who's, and I'm sorry when I call them young, but I'm 87, so everyone's a lot younger. I think the person spoke about parking. Parking is a necessity for a family. You can't go do family shopping and take the bus. And you can't go to the store to buy clothes for kids on the bus. So I think that that is something you should consider. Now, my other comment has to do with Ward 2. I live in precinct 1, and more than half of precinct 1 is Nonantum. You might not know this, and the people from Nonantum might not know it, but the city has redrawn the lines for Nonantum, and if you Google Nonantum, Mass, you'll see that the line goes all the way down to Elliott Street and then cuts back towards the Charles River, and then goes down the Charles River. So it's part of Newton. One of the things that your colleagues who talk, when they talk about zoning, say that they want to have vibrant, walkable villages. Nonantum is a viable, walkable village. If you go there, you'll see people in the streets and you will see them using the local businesses. Nonantum has as much workforce or moderate income housing as any village in the city. And what you're going to do is destroy Nonantum. Nonantum doesn't want to be destroyed. Nonantum has a plan to provide place for you to build more housing. They would rather it be affordable side housing, but if you want to build your upscale housing, you can do it. But they have a place for you to build it. But the committee rejected that proposal from Nonantum. I would ask you to reconsider that. All of the comments that are made here are based on state proclamation, guidelines, laws that are intended or were intended at the time to be applied to people low and moderate income. They were not intended to give you the idea that the state wanted you to build 2 and 3 bedroom units that were going to cost $3,000 and $4,000 and $5,000 a month for rent. The 10, was it 8,330? That number of units came from the, what was it, the Mayor's, Metropolitan Mayor's Consortium. They met with Charlie Baker back in 2017.
Peter, I'm gonna ask you to.
You're gonna ask me to shut up.
Wrap it up.
Okay, I'm going to shut. I'm gonna, I want to finish this. Back in 2017, when City Warren was the mayor, that's when they agreed on building 1,330. But the reason they wanted to do it is that the people they wanted to help were people who were paying 50% of their income for housing. And you are not addressing that issue. You are building upscale housing. Some people call gentrification, and it is bad for this community. It discriminates against the north side, or at least my section, discriminates against Newtonville, Nonantum, Newton Corner, the areas that I represented when I was active with you. So I would ask you to
Yeah, I think we've addressed the sort of state law and, you know, we could sort of debate that. It's after 7:30, so I know, but why Annie? So I am gonna cut it off. I'm happy to stay.
We're not going anywhere.
Not here. It's
I
not.
just, I really, you know.
Here.
Great, let's go for a few more minutes. Not really, it's really not enough.
Thank you. I understand. I appreciate
I
it.
need to respond to one thing that Peter said, though. I believe that our staff have been in touch with the folks from the state so that they won't be surprised by what we submit in terms of how well we're complying with the law. So let Deb answer that.
So Mr. Harrington and whoever was listening, Mr. Harrington and whoever was listening, if he can hear me. Mr. Harrington. Mr. Harrington, I just want you to know that our city staff and consultants have actually been working very closely with the head person, Chris Kluckman, who you've probably heard of the formerly called Department of Housing and Community Development. And they are very enthusiastic about our plan. So I hear you in terms of what legal language might be helpful to sort of preface our zoning ordinance. And I don't see any reason why it couldn't be added, but if you could submit it to us.
No.
Oh, you have? Okay. I think, okay, fine. I think it does no harm.
It would be hopeless argument we'll have to make.
I hear, okay, I hear you. The state law, as we said earlier, and I think, I guess it has to be said again, because although those words are in it, they also don't allow us to require a number of bedrooms. They don't allow us to do that. And we don't have to do a back and forth. I just wanted to. Okay.
I want to see that. There's a lot of misinformation, and that's why I'm asking you.
Thank you, Peter. Annie, go ahead.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you all for
Annie
sticking
and I went
around.
to Day Junior High together just a few years ago.
Thank you. Annie Raines, I'm a 50-year resident of Newtonville. And I wanted to borrow this to point out something on the VCOD plan, which is that Court Street, my street, is being bisected. People who live in my part of Newton, that means slice in half. Right down the middle, so that one side is an MRT and the other side is a regular standard multi-residence. This was done in response to complaints about rezoning it to a village center type zoning. But what it actually does is it creates a buffer zone that allows the village center buildings on Washington Street to build as high and deep and wide as they want with no limitations, even though they're abutting homes. And Deb, when you said you hit homes, that really hit home with me. Because these are our homes. We're talking about our backyards, which sit 5 feet below the grade of Washington Street already. Now these unlimited building heights are going to throw our backyards into perpetual shade and also divide neighbor against neighbor because our zonings are different. And there's no other street that's being done with, except for I think a small section of Border Street in West Newton. So I think it's wrong. And I think that for the 40 or so units you're gaining, destroying a lot of lives and ways of life. Still talking here. And then if there are 4,000, Rick, if there are 4,000 units already baked into the current multi-resident zoning, why aren't those being renamed something so that they can be included in this tally of units that can be built as part of the village center and part of the MBTA Communities Act?
Some of them may be already.
Okay,
Yeah,
well, we need our 40.
That's what I'm talking about. They're strewn throughout, so some may be in here already. I can't know for sure. They're block by block.
Yeah, there's no other block this is happening with.
Could you,
Like
Annie?
Court Street.
Excuse me, could you clarify where exactly, I'm sorry. Could you clarify exactly where on the map you're talking about?
I'm talking about this green line here.
So that's the MRT district.
This is half of Court Street, and this is the other half of Court Street.
And why do you think those are 2.5-story buildings in the green?
Okay, and then across from it, right, but they're a buffer zone that allows the blue to build.
Which is 3.5-story buildings, but that's gonna impact the 2.5-story buildings in the MRT zone, not across the street.
It's going to impact the 2.5-story buildings in the MRT zone in such a way that is not being done anywhere else in Newton except for one small section of Border Street, because there are limitations. There are limitations when the VC, this VC2?
Yeah.
When the VC2 is placed next to a residential zone, an R zone, then that's a different standard in terms of the limits on setbacks and heights than there is when it's abutting a village center overlay zone.
Actually, not entirely. The MRT is also an all residential zone. So the VC2 may not be more than 3. So for example, you can't have an affordable housing bonus of another story there.
Okay.
And there are setbacks to the residential.
What are the rear setbacks at VC2?
20 feet.
20 feet.
20 feet abutting MRT?
Yes.
Yes.
Ooh, okay, well, that does change things.
Never mind.
I use the rest of my time to complete.
That's a Gilda Radner. You remember Gilda Radner?
Hello,
Never mind.
Ms. thanks for organizing this and thanks, to the appellate.
Lens on TV.
In the interest of time, because this is supposed to be a Ward 2 meeting and you're supposed to be hearing from Ward 2 residents, I'm going to ask a series of questions which I do not want you to answer. I just think these questions need to be raised. These questions need to be raised. The first question is, why, when a 15-year-old boy researches the economics of upzoning and presents you with the evidence, do you reply with a hope that he can live in the armory someday and condolences because some generations in the future, someone else might be able to buy a house? Okay, that's one question. Don't answer. The next question.
Reasonable.
At ZAP, numerous times I've been watching ZAP and I've heard repeatedly that in the new city council term to begin in January, that is after we elect a new city council, that they are going to rezone the corridors and they're also going to rezone the residential neighborhoods. Will that include Baldpate Hill? And how much will you upzone all the residential neighborhoods? I'm also wondering if you're familiar with the term blockbusting. Because years ago, blockbusting was something that developers did. I don't want you to answer. Years ago, there was something called blockbusting, which is what property speculators would do. They would go into a neighborhood and they would scare the racists by hiring Black women to push baby carriages around. And they would scare people into selling their houses cheaply, and then they would resell them. And what I see happening is a kind of modern day blockbusting, where we are incentivizing neighbors, pitting neighbors against neighbors, to be the first to sell to the big property speculator and the first to get out. I've already seen people making this calculation. How much money could I make? For example, I asked if my property were rezoned to an MRT, how much could be built on it? I found out 18 rental units. So all we need in my neighborhood is for one person to die, their children to live in another state and not care, sell to a big property out-of-state development entity, and then there will be 18 apartments in our neighborhood if the residential rezoning goes through in the next term. So that will set off a chain reaction of people leaving because that's not why they came to Newton. And I understand that housing prices are inflating, and that's partly because our zoning doesn't constrain them. You can use zoning to constrain what's built to maintain naturally affordable housing. You can also use the tools that we know work for subsidized affordable housing for the most vulnerable people who can't make it up the housing ladder on their own. And we know how to provide mortgage incentives and down payment assistance and financial counseling to help people climb up the housing ladder. But we're not doing any of that. This is trickle-down economics applied to housing markets. It doesn't work, and we should not do anything more than what the state is requiring. And I can't understand why any of you disagree with that. Don't answer that question. Next, why did the administration not send out a notice with water bills to every household in Newton to ask them whether or not they wanted the villages to nearby homes to be upzoned? Do you think it's fair to make such a radical change to Newton without getting the consent of residents, particularly those whose neighborhoods are being upzoned? Do not answer that. My next question, what is the rationale for putting specific properties in and out of MRT zones? For example, I noticed that Allerton Road has been zoned for MRT. And then when Dr. Lobovitz announced he was running for city council, Vicki Danberg moved to have his house moved out of the MRT. Did she think that was going to make him drop out of the race? I wonder. Don't answer that question. When you say that low income and fixed income Newton residents, what do you say to the low income and fixed income Newton residents who are likely to be displaced by this high density for-profit redevelopment of luxury rent? Who do you think is going to be living in these units? And don't answer that.
Kathleen, I'm going to ask you to.
I'm going to finish now.
Okay.
Okay, because this is for Ward.
I get it, but we only have the space till 8.
Yeah. Finish, Emily, okay? I want to know when the out-of-state real estate entities, when Blackstone come, when these big companies come, nobody, not even wealthy people in Baldpate Hill, not even people in historic districts in Chestnut Hill or anywhere else, nobody is going to be safe when these people, these vultures come to buy up our property. You are destroying the American dream is what you're doing. Thanks.
Peter, and we're gonna, yeah, let's see if we can get three, because we really didn't get out of here, we only rented the space for a short.
Business owner, can you hear me?
Yep.
The business owner asked me to just say that her business depends very much on parking. And like Vicki Danberg once said, parking is the lifeblood of our village centers. And she needs it, so she just put in a request for me to plug that. Good evening, everybody. Councilor Laredo's last newsletter wrote that the village center zoning could add 15,000, could rezone for 15,000 new units, which doesn't count 3,500 units that are already in the pipeline, approved, or have even been built since 2017. So if you add 15,000 and 3,500, that's almost 19,000. Even if only half of these were built, say by 2040 or something like that, that would be a 30% increase in our housing stock at a time when the state's population and our cities is declining. So I'm asking, or I'm saying that this is a revolution. It's not just a reform, at least possibly, especially if we go beyond complying just with what the state wants to what is possible, it looks like, with the VCOD zoning. So a basic principle of democracy is that it works with the consent of the governed when major changes are required. And this scope of development was not revealed in our last mayoral debates or in the last general election. We didn't debate this scope of development then. So we really haven't had a say. We need a direct say. And that relates to three quick questions I'm going to ask. First of all, why didn't we get a petition on the ballot? The public requested it. There was a public meeting that requested this. It was turned down, but why didn't we get a vote, a ballot measure, or a non-binding one, just so we could see what the people think about this? Either or both, the MBTA Communities Act or the VCOD, or both. And secondly, why in its major community engagement survey that it did last year, the feedback tool, so-called, that farmed out to grad students and a professor of computer science who has no background, at least no apparent background in survey research, to do a survey for us? Why didn't we get a junk survey that could have been done a lot better? On that, it was Crowdsourced Democracy, the group that did that, and it had on its board James Fishkin, who's a top-notch political scientist, world-renowned expert on polling. They could have invited him in and had him help supervise our poll, or maybe just say that it should be redone, because he will not ever do a poll without representative sampling.
Peter, I definitely want to make sure that everyone who's standing can have a chance. So
I'm saying that we need to do real survey research with representative sampling, not these phony self-selecting polls.
okay.
And finally, well, Kathleen made this point too, kind of, the Newtonville Area Council sent postcards out to everybody to invite them in. We had twice as many respondents as the feedback tool, which is the biggest that the city did, and it covered the whole city. We just covered 3 wards. So the idea of sending out utility bills or something like that to poll the whole city, I think is a great idea. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Peter.
Melanie, I want to thank you for organizing this. Could you speak into the mic, please? You have to lean into it.
Just speak.
Yes, sir.
Get close to it.
Okay, so here I am yet again, making another statement. Let me see, it seems that some of the decision-making is not driven by data, and other people have touched upon this points. Root cause analysis. Why are we not looking at the root cause of why real estate is so high, and why we don't have affordable housing? We're not addressing that, right? We're not addressing the root cause. And also it seems like there's a lack of homegrown data analysis.
It seems like we're just listening to what MAPC and the housing advocates are telling us, and we're just responding without actually looking to see if it makes sense. And so I recall Councilor Laredo asking about a metric. How will we know if we're succeeding? And I believe a reply, this was in the Zap, I believe the reply was, oh, well, we see young families back. I mean, that's not really, that's empirical. Anyways, but to data analysis that I would really like to see you guys do is last December, there was a Zoom meeting hosted for the villages, and I spoke, and I remember Carrie Sorrow speaking, and it was the one for Newton Corner, Nonanton, and I brought up, and I believe this topic hasn't been brought up, I brought up the fact that on the north side of Newton, we're subjected to so much traffic and congestion that has been happening as a result of development, excessive amount of development happening just over our border in Waltham, in Watertown, and it's excessive. And they're coming, and all these people are driving through. I mean, think about it, right? The people on Arsenal Street, on Pleasant Street, they want to head to I-95 or the Mass Pike. They're not going up Center Street and connecting on the Mass Pike at Newton Corner. What are they doing? They're driving through all the northern villages, and we're seeing it. We're seeing so much traffic. And I spoke to the fact that there seems to be a lack of equity in the densification that's being planned for the city. And it seems like in an area on the north side, which is already so dense to begin with, and we're dealing with the density just over our borders, and really, truly, I think there should be a collaboration with other, with the leaders in Waltham and in Watertown, because we all are sharing the infrastructure. But, there seems to be a lack of equity in terms of determining the amount of densification. So my question is, I'm requesting again, can you please look at the densification over our borders in the north side of Newton? Because if you look at the map of Newton, if you look at the map, you'll see on the south, there's like golf courses. The abutting properties on the south side of Newton do not have development like we have.
Okay, no, thank you. I appreciate that. And I think we did address that earlier. There's maybe just where, do you want to address? I'm kind of hoping we can, seems like there's a lot of comments now at the end here rather than questions.
Well, she had one question, I think. Was that a question?
I have one quick question, and you can give me an answer.
Love it.
My question is, how many truly affordable units do we have or will we have? And when I talk about truly affordable, I mean for the teaching assistants, nurses' aides, preschool teachers. Are there gonna be, is there gonna be any kind of housing for these individuals? Is there any housing now for anyone who makes under $30,000, $35,000?
That's not
affordable. I'm not talking about 110,000, 120,000. I'm talking about true affordable housing. And we're getting it. It's a farce. We're getting all this luxury housing and no true affordable housing. And the other thing
do you want me to answer the question?
I'll just have this one other little piece. I'm a little concerned about the type of housing that's being developed. At one of the ZAP meetings, it was mentioned that we don't need grass, we don't need trees in the back of these developments because these families don't need swing sets. And that came up in a ZAP meeting. And I'll pull the tape.
That's not a correct quote.
Oh, it is.
Okay, not from me, not from Pam.
No, it's not from Pam.
And not from me. Okay. Let me.
And the plan person.
Sounds like that's what she heard. So why don't you?
Yeah, okay. So what I understand. You want me to answer the question about affordable housing? Okay. So you are absolutely correct if what you are saying is there's not enough housing that's affordable to people we need to live in our community. You are absolutely 1000% correct. It's not a simple solution to get to that point. Right now, we can't even build enough housing for two-parent professional families or a couple who are both getting really good salaries, right? So what are we doing? We've done all of this analysis. We're going to do it again. We did it in 2019. We're going to do it again starting next term to see how many deed restricted affordable units we can require that are economically feasible. We did the analysis, I said in 2019, we worked with economic analysts during this, when we were looking at, okay, what can our metrics be for this proposal? In order to go deeper than 50%, you need subsidies. There are limited subsidies. At the same time, during the same time frame, we created the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust so that we have an entity now in the city who can act quickly to put money forward when they get funded, and they have a couple $1 million that'll go in a heartbeat. Get a couple $1 million more this year. We need a way of funding them. There's now a state option that's being developed to create a program that can do that. We don't have enough federal subsidies. We don't have enough state subsidies, and the city's very limited in what it can do. But you're right. We don't have enough.
So we don't have true affordable apartments.
Well, we do have some.
Well,
Yeah.
not for the truly affordable. And maybe we need to start looking at some private public.
Yes. We don't build the housing. We just can
Well,
enable
we
it.
need to start looking outside the box.
So,
We
always
do.
our inclusionary zoning, which is going to be required for all this development, only goes down to 50%. So you're not going to get anything lower than that.
And what is 50%?
50% is about, area median, it was 88,000, is it still?
Oh, no, that's much lower.
What is
Oh,
it?
wait,
What's the AMI? No, what's the full AMI?
Less than.
Area median. 120?
100% of AMI is 120.
120, it's 120, this is so 50% is a
60,000.
two people working in a family cannot earn for a 50% AMI affordable, okay? And listen, this is a very affluent, expensive city to live in. That's not your fault, that's not our fault. The economics of what how real estate works is that the underlying land is so expensive that the numbers don't work for us to do an armory or anybody else to come forward to make that work. We're trying desperately to get to our 10% so we don't have to deal with 40Bs anymore. We're working our way to it. We're almost there. And when we get there, that means we have built a certain amount of true affordable housing. We've started an affordable trust to raise money so we can control and help affordable projects. We're doing everything we can, but the city doesn't build except for the armory. We just don't. We have to create opportunities.
But I think we need to be honest when we talk about any of this
Ma'am, I would love
development that
to,
it's affordable.
let's just let the other two folks, and then we're gonna call it a night, because we're supposed to be out of here.
I'll make it fast. I'm from Newtonville.
Could you come closer, please? We can't hear you.
I'm from Newtonville, and I would like to request that we put Newtonville Village zoning on hold until they can look at the manufacturing areas that we have that would completely satisfy. I'm not asking to not do it, but just put it on hold and look at what else we have. I mean, we love our village center, and this was just totally decimated.
Okay, thank you. I think we've heard that, and there's an opportunity for amendments.
Yeah, but why does it have to go through now? That's my question.
No, I get it. So you'll see if your elected officials choose to do that or not, but this is why you're here, to make these requests.
And if people want to, this SaveNewtonVillages.com that they can look at. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thank you all very much, both up there and here. I appreciate that. I do have a question. I think I have to make a couple of comments to get to the question. I live near Newtonville, the heart of the village. And as some of the development has happened around there, I've seen a certain kind of displacement of people who fit into the categories of people that the woman was talking about before, people who genuinely are not wealthy enough to afford the affordable housing.
And what's really sad and makes me cry and make me actually a little ashamed to live in Newton is that although I can't talk to you about droves of numbers, there are people of pretty low income that have managed to find a way to live in Newton. And when this affordable housing thing came along, I'm particularly thinking about Port Street, nobody really stood up and fought for the people who live there and can no longer and have had to leave Newton. I'm not saying these were friends of mine, but there were people I knew, they were neighbors, and they couldn't dream, as the woman told me when I asked her as she was shoveling her snow. She'd lived there for 20 years, and she could not dream of affording an affordable unit. But everybody got to feel good. And anybody who was asked to look into it with more detail oriented of the individuals that might get affected in that way, were pretty dismissive of it because they were only small units. And they weren't going to be making a lot of money for anybody, including the town, by letting them go on. And it turned out it was because without her knowing it, more units were rented out in the building than it was zoned for. So nobody had a leg to stand on. Well, I'm asking us to stand on our own legs. And if it's okay with you, at least keep count of the people that are being pushed out. There's so few of them left because they're being pushed out for so long. And what are their names? Is there somebody who can do research and even know them or what their names or care about them? You know, if we're keeping track of all these huge numbers, we're just too busy with big numbers to look at the small numbers. And the small numbers exist and they do count. So when we're counting, like who's affording to live here, where is the affordable housing? Some of it's in the cracks. Can we consider opening up some of the cracks, grandfathering in? Another woman in my neighborhood who I never knew, just saw her going back and forth and found out from the person who had bought the house that she lives in, had wanted to keep her on. And he applied to have an extra unit so that she could stay in her attic in-law apartment or whatever it was and continue living there because she had lived there for a long, long time. He wanted her there. She wanted to be there. And the next time I talked to him, he had been denied and she was gone. So when I'm at some kind of party and someone says, where do you live? I'd like to ask this question. Do I have your permission to say Newton, nice and loud? Or do I have to say Newton and just try to make sure they didn't quite hear that? I want to be proud. And I want somebody to count. You're so good at counting. These aren't large numbers. Can you please count them? The other thing on Court Street was people said, oh, that other building is empty. Why is it empty? It had 3 or 4 units in it and people in school not that long ago. And it was empty because who wouldn't want to move into them? It was made empty so people could make more money out of it. Has anybody counted them or know who they are? That's my question.
Thank you very much. Bob, you'll close us out.
Bob Cavanaugh from Court Street. A quick aside. My wife and I have 3 children, all grown. The youngest is 38, lives in West Roxbury. They're planning to move. They're looking in Medfield. And you know what? He's not whining about not being able to move to Newton. I hear, oh, we have to make room for everybody, for our children. The children whined about it. One's in West Concord, the other's in West Roxbury moving. The other's out in Oakland. So I'm not really too sure where all that comes from. My main question, though, is over the last several weeks, I've been trying to understand the logic of why certain lots were in MRT and others weren't. I was looking at the map of Wobbin, and I went and I did an explore last week. I drove my car to Collins Street, parked in front of, I think it was number 42, and I walked to the T-stop. Popped it on my Fitbit, 2 minutes and 7 seconds. Return trip was 2 minutes and 5 seconds. That house is not at all part of an MRT or anything. And yet on my block, houses that are a good 5 minutes from the train station, which is not the Green Line, you gotta walk down that long flight of stairs, which the Attorney General is threatening not to do for us. I know that's one of her threats. But that house is included in an MRT. I'm not saying move them. I'm trying to understand the logic of how that happened. I got finally, because I did ask Councilor Crosby twice, she did not even respond to me. I finally got a response from Zach or something, long range planning. He sent me 2 documents that supposedly encompass the rules. 5 bullet points on one page are determining all of these changes. And then on another one, there were 4 bullet points. Some of them have such holes in you could drive a Mack truck through, which is probably how, they added 2 things on my block, the Marty's and Whole Foods. But they took out something in Hubbard. Again, I'm not saying good or bad, but I'm trying to figure out the process. Councilor Crosby has had nothing to tell me. And this paper light that I got from zoning and planning tells me nothing. So I get the impression this is, and what did he say, Zach? After all, this is a political process, which indicates to me it's what Bismarck said. We don't want to see sausages or laws being made. And I get that impression from a lot of this stuff, that backfield traders, some lots, 2-minute walk. No, nothing.
Thank you. That's a good point. It's worth, taking a closer look at the maps and making sure that things are being logical. If there's a certain, what your argument is, there is a certain period of, certain distance from a T-stop, Green Line, et cetera, that should be MRT, then, so, yeah, so, all right.
So Bob, I'm offended that you don't remember the hour I spent with you at the Nathaniel Allen House over lunch.
She was not informed that about it. She recommended that I contact you and
the politics are that we're reducing the scope of this in order to try to make it more palatable to you all. That's what's going on. Woburn was not reduced. Woburn was expanded. Woburn, no,
The one.
we took out one lot that was public. So it was public property, which shouldn't have been on the map. That's all we did. No, did you hear what I said? We took out one property that was a public lot, public parcel. It did not belong in the map. It was a mistake.
It's no politics.
So there was no politics around Woburn. Woburn, actually, we increased from the original proposal by adding the VC3 into it by the T-stop. So no, we did not reduce. We expanded Woburn. Okay.
All right. Thank you all so much. This can be a really touchy subject. I really appreciate the tempers being kept in line for the most part up here as well as in the audience. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I hope you feel more informed. We'll see you at the next Zap and City Council meeting. Thank you. Thanks to all the folks online.